Welcome back to my channel. My name is Carolyn. Today is part two of my indie bookstore touring journey. This one is going to be my Midwest edition, which is very exciting because I went to a couple of places in the Midwest plus Nashville, and I went to an indie bookstore in each of them, and it was so fun exploring each new indie bookstore place. And I think each of them just has like their unique flavor. I do have another video talking about my East Coast editions, and I think on the whole, I do prefer the East Coast ones that I went to because there was a lot of diversity in their picks, but that doesn't mean that I didn't really enjoy the Midwest ones that I went to. And I will pick which one of these is my favorite one. There's also going to be a little mini haul as well with each bookstore, like I did in the previous video, and I'm going to be talking about like the pros and cons of each store and upload some pictures and videos of my experience. So let's get started. So I went on a kind of a road trip from Iowa to Nashville, and then from Nashville back to Iowa in the span of about a week. Left Bank Books. This bookstore was founded in 1969 by a group of graduate students from the University of Washington. This bookstore prides itself on Bank Books is the oldest and largest indie bookstore in the St. Louis area. And this bookstore prides itself on sparking conversation by selecting intelligent, relevant, and culturally diverse books. First of all, this bookstore was so cute, and it was on kind of like the corner of like a little quiet like shopping plaza where you could go and like grab a coffee or have like a cute lunch before going into the bookstore. This bookstore, I really enjoyed the way that it was, the books were set up because they were set up so that the covers were facing you instead of the spines facing you. And it was just really cool to see like all the covers on the bookshelves, which I really enjoy. This one has a collection of new and used books, and the I really liked like the lower. They had two levels, so I did really enjoy the lower level of the bookstore because it was like a very quiet like refuge away from like the busyness of the top floor, and that's kind of where all the used books were, and their selection of science fiction and fantasy books, which I really. There was a signed copy of Fonda Lee's Jade City in the bookstore, which I was so close to getting, but I didn't because I have this thing in my head where I need to buy signed books if I've been to like author events, and I think that just makes like the signed book like more special. So that's kind of like on me, but it was there, and I thought that was really a nice touch. The thing that I also like about it is that there is a lot of culturally diverse books in the store as well. Lots of things to choose from. I don't think there's quite a substantial like, kids section. I can see that they do try to pick diverse books from different types of authors, and that's something that's really awesome as well. I do think that the top floor was a little bit crowded, and one thing that I've realized about independent bookstores in the Midwest, and it is what it is. Missouri is a red state, and but usually in red states they have bigger cities in the area that are blue, and I find that in bookstores in the Midwest, a lot of them feel the need to be really loud about the diversity, which it is what it is. I think in this bookstore it comes across as a lot of knickknacks that I personally don't really enjoy when it comes to bookstores, like like little like coffee table books that are like you just kind of read them one and done. Like sets of books about like best like women inventors, right? Like Like, sure, they're like fun to read about, but I think I'd just rather read like a Wikipedia page about them. And I personally think that it detracts from like the other books. I just personally don't like strenuous, like coffee table, like small books like that, where you can just kind of like flip, and then that's kind of it. I just like a little bit more depth, I guess, but it's not really my thing. And I feel like a lot with these Midwest bookstores that they really have to really feel like they have to be really loud about that kind of stuff, which I don't really see on like East Coast bookstores. Like they know their choices are diverse, right? And they don't really have to like advertise it, which I really like. But I understand that within indie bookstores that have to be kind of the center of the community and sparking like advocacy and things like that, that is more prominent in their bookstores. So, but it's just not my personal preference. I was able to get a book from the used section of the bookstore, and that was Little House on the Prairie, by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and this was illustrated by Garth Williams. I am trying to collect these illustrated collector's editions of these books, which I'm really excited about. I actually reread this book earlier this year via audiobook, and I really enjoyed that experience. But having the colored editions is something kind of special to me, and yeah, I really like them. I'm collecting them, and I'm actually really excited for the adaptation that's coming out on Netflix. I think it's this year. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see a modern adaptation of this book. I've also been kind of collecting bookmarks from every bookstore too, and this one was really cute because it had a cat on it as well. So cat on it and just really cute. So Left Bank Books. Totally recommend like grabbing a coffee and then walking around in Left Bank Books. It is really cute. And then after St. Louis, we drove all the way over to Nashville, Tennessee, which I had never been before. So it was a really cool experience. And of course, I had to go to an independent bookstore. This one was really special, actually. And spoiler alert, yes, this one was my favorite bookstore from the three bookstores that I went to on this road trip. And that is Parnassus Books. This bookstore was founded by Ann Patchett and her business partner, Karen Hayes, before she retired. And now I think Ann Patchett just runs the whole thing. And it is a chain of bookstores as well. I think there's some that you can find at the airport, which is really cool. I thought just the concept behind this bookstore was really sweet. Anne Patchett wanted to kind of recreate that bookish happiness of her childhood. You know, when you go into a bookstore and the staff there knows you by name and knows what kind of books that you like, and it's not so commercialized but more intimate. And Parnassus, I found out that Parnassus means literature, learning, and music in Greek mythology, which is really cool as well. When I walk into Parnassus Books, it is very apparent that this is a center for community, right? There is sort of a stage where authors can have book events as well. And there is I would say a substantial section of almost everything. Most notably, I noticed that there were history books and science books, nonfiction books, and I really just enjoyed finding out what that collection was because those aren't really my preferred uh, categories of books that I like. I barely read like history nonfiction books, but after like looking at them, it made me actually want to, which is really exciting. There's also a really magical like kids section with like a little doorway that you could go through, and that was really sweet. There's also a really great collection of like staff selections that they pick out, and everything has kind of like those like handwritten notes for the staff, like tells you why they picked it out and why they would recommend it. Great selection of just fiction in general. and of course a lot of Ann Patchett books. So if you're looking for any Ann Patchett books, there is a whole section for them. There's a couple of knickknacks here and there. There are journals and notebooks and things like that, but it was mostly the books, and I really, 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 really enjoyed all of that. And I think it was also really spacious. There was so much room to like look around and see things. I think that yeah, the definitely the pros of this one was definitely the nonfiction. There were like cookbooks and just a lot of creative, a really creative nonfiction selection in my opinion, and of course really great fiction and kids fiction. And I actually bought two books from this bookstore. I bought The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. This is a children's fantasy classic that I talked about in my April wrap up, and I'm so excited to have this in my collection because it is just an it's just a great book, honestly, and I reread it on my trip as well, and it's just as good when I'm 31 as it is when I was a young child. So I'm really happy to have this one. Honestly, also this one is kind of hard to get in indie bookstores. I haven't really seen a copy of this. So again, that just tells you how great their children's selection was. And they also had a new versions of the Laura Ingalls Wilder Little House on the Prairie series. The sixth book in the series as well. This one is also full colored with illustrations by Garth Williams. And I reread this as well on the trip, and I think this is one of my favorite books in the entire series, which I'm not exactly sure why, because this literally is a book about them surviving in town in the winter when no trains are coming, so they didn't have any food and they really had to ration out all the resources they had to survive the winter. It's pretty bleak if you think about it, but I really like this one in the series, and I can't wait to, again to collect the other ones in this series as well. Here is the bookmark for Parnassus books. This one's really cool. It features a lot of Anne Patchett's books as well. And then the last bookstore I went to was when we went back from Nashville on our way back to Iowa, and we went to Rainy Day Books. And Rainy Day Books is a bit of a smaller bookstore, but it is and Rainy Day Books is a bit of a smaller bookstore compared to the other two that I went to. However, it is the oldest bookstore in the Kansas City metro area. This one was first opened in 1975. Pride themselves for being an advocate for literacy and for the community, which is great. This bookstore I really liked as well. It was quite spacious, and there was actually a place where you could like sit down and read, which was cute. I also had that in Parnassus books too. I forgot to mention them. Rainy Day Books is a bookstore that I thought the classics selection was really awesome because they had some classics editions that I hadn't seen in other indie bookstores. For example, they had the annotated Jane Austen books, and I did talk about one of the annotated Pride and Prejudice in my April wrap up. But they had Northanger Abbey, they had Emma, and they had a lot of the more trending classics now, but they had really cool like editions. They also had a collection of like NYRB books, which is awesome, and Parnassus Books also had this as well, but I thought that the selection at Rainy Day Books was more interesting almost. Like I had never seen Magda Szabo in an indie bookstore before, but they had a few selection of her books in the bookstore, so that's always cool. I think Left Bank Books I don't think had any NYRBs, but yeah, Parnassus and Rainy Day Books did. And they also have a selection of religious books as well, and I really also enjoyed their science fiction fantasy collection. I think that was one of the major genres that they had, which was really cool. I wouldn't say they had anything like obscure or anything like that. Definitely, Rainy Day Books is trying to appeal more to like a wider audience, I think, because there was like more emphasis on like popular books that had been like trendy or like talked about, right? But I think they did make an effort to at least have interesting like additions and different versions of the book, which I liked. So I would definitely go again. And they also had bookish puzzles that I was so tempted to get because they were so pretty. But in the end, I decided not to because I'm just not a puzzle person. But they almost convinced me that I was a puzzle person. The book that I got at Rainy Day Books was The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. Again, if you watched my April wrap up video, you know that I read both The Tainted Cup and the sequel, A Drop of Corruption, in April. I listened to the audiobook of A Drop of Corruption, which was great as well. And it really honestly just made this road trip and just made it so fun listening to that book. And I was just on the heels of reading The Tainted Cup before I went on the road trip, and I really loved The Tainted Cup. These two books are gonna end up in my top books of the year, and I'm just so excited to read the third book that comes out in August. It like cannot come soon enough. And I haven't been excited about a fantasy series in a long time. So honestly, this is really special to me, and I just had to get a copy. Also, I kind of am obsessed with this cover. There's just something about it that I really, really like. Bookmark. I actually think this one's my favorite bookmark, even though it's probably the most simple out of all of them. It just has this like gray red scheme to it, and has like a stack of books on the back. Those were all the bookstores that I went to. Again, I think Parnassus is my favorite because it has a wide selection of books. However, it's not just like the trending books, right? There's a lot more that I could discover in that, and I came out with a lot of recommendations. For example, a staff had recommended Mother of Night by Kurt Vonnegut, which sounds something that's really interesting, and so I'm really excited about that one. And yeah, I think that's it. So let me know again if you've been to any of these indie bookstores or what you like in a bookstore. What's your favorite bookstore that you go to? And let's talk about it. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.